It was a Friday evening and I was getting home from school. I was 13 years old and was really excited to go hunting. I love hunting, especially the ranch we go to in Alice, Texas. I've been going there since I was 4 and I have so many memories of the place. It was my grandpa, my dad, and I. Going there were going to be a few other people like the ranch owner's family. We were packed up and ready to go. It was deer season. My favorite season. Just the feeling of seeing a big deer right in front of your eyes is a wonderful feeling. And of course, shooting it, people say that it's wrong to kill animals, but I disagree. If you're actually eating it, we got to the ranch and it was 10 p.m., so it was pretty dark out there. The ranch is 300 acres, I believe, and the campsite is an old little shack, probably the size of a normal bedroom. There is electricity there, but it's not a huge cabin where most hunters sleep in. However, there are little beds there. But one time my dad found a huge snake shed in one of the beds when I was little. So from then on, we sleep in a tent. The camp is surrounded by woods with a little field up ahead, probably a little less than the size of a football field. We use that field for dove hunting anyhow. We unloaded and chatted for a while around the campfire, telling jokes and whatnot. When we heard this scream, it was the most disturbing thing I'd ever heard. It sounded like a human hybrid or something. The scream sounded not too far away. All of us jumped from our seats and looked at each other. Every man there was freaked out. I could see it in their eyes. The ranch owner was the first one to say, "What the woo was that?" He then told us, and one of his family members to go check it out. He's a pretty old guy in his 70s, so that's why we went to go check it out. We took my grandpa's ATV and did a quick search around the perimeter, only to find nothing. I was still traumatized. I was even scared to go in the blind by myself. As all hunters know, we have to wake up before dawn and get up into the blind to be unseen by the deer. I went to sleep in the tent with a gun right beside me. I woke up to the alarm and got ready. I was scared of being left alone in the dark. Even though it was only an hour or two before dawn breaks, I was still petrified by the scream, and it still echoed in my mind today. My grandpa dropped me off of the blind with his ATV and left. My dad was already in his position. My grandpa's not a soft grandpa. He expects you to know it and do it. Him being him. He just left me in the dark, expecting me to find my way up to the blind myself, so I began climbing up the ladder and began navigating with just my hands. I got into the blind and waited for the sun to peek out. 20 minutes passed and it was still dark out when I noticed something in the middle of the trail I couldn't see well, so I thought it was the right time to use a night vision sight that my uncle had given me. I was excited expecting a big deer, but when I put my eye into the sight, when I saw still haunts me today. I don't care if you believe me or not, but I was expecting a deer only to find a person walking towards the woods. It was distorted looking, but had the same outline of a person. I don't know how it spotted me, but I saw it turn and face towards me now. The night vision is not super clear, so I couldn't see its face, but I could see it was looking straight at me. Then, what I heard next will stick with me for the rest of my life. Gave out the same exact blood-curdling scream as the night before, only louder. At that moment, I cannot describe the fear I felt. The word fear is not enough to describe how I felt. I managed to break free from whatever shock I was in, and managed to grab the 22, and started to fire the entire clip into the path it was standing in. I was still frightened, so I got my rifle and fired all the rounds into the path. When I looked back into the night vision, it was gone. I started to get texts and calls like crazy, mostly from my dad. I told him what happened, and he had heard it too, and so did my grandpa. You still go there to hunt, but it has not been the same peaceful hunt now. When I hunt, I go with my dad, because I'm scared that thing might come back. I don't know what that thing was, but whatever it was, it survived 25 rounds from a 22 and 4 rounds from a 243, because when we went to go check, there were no signs of blood or anything, not even footprints. I know it was still dark when I fired all those rounds, but I know for sure at least one of them had to hit whatever that thing was. It was the fall of 1986. I was 23 years old. I'd never really been scared in the woods before. Honestly, I always felt like the wilderness was my safe place, somewhere I could go and relax and get away from the stresses of life. I've never seen a Bigfoot or skinwalker or any kind of boogeyman in the woods. As a lineman for a small town in West Kentucky, I have seen crazy being a small muni. We all had to wear a lot of hats, including utility disconnects. Wasn't fun, but it was part of the job, and there was a lot of crazy, but never in the woods. My only real hobbies were hunting and fishing. Back then, it was easy to find a really good place to hunt just by stopping and asking the landowner for permission. Most were eager to have the deer population thinned out as they were really destructive eating young soybean crops. And this was coal country. And back in the 50s, there was a lot of strip mining that left a lot of land unusable for building and farming. So much of it was open for hunting. It was October 1986. Daylight savings time hadn't happened yet, and it was still daylight till just after 7 p.m. I left work at 4 and ran home to change into my camo. It was bow season in Kentucky, my favorite season. I was gonna hunt in an area that was special to me. It was in an area we'll call Ridge. This was a very remote area with broken farmland and wooded areas. After parking, I decided not to unload my three-wheeler and just walk the 3/4 of a mile to where I was going to hunt. I was using a summit climbing stand, so I had to carry my stand and my bow as well as my fanny pack with my knife and flashlight. I had to walk halfway around the cornfield. The corn had not been cut yet, so I stayed in the lane left by the farmers so that they could get their equipment to the upper end of the field. The field was rectangular, and the upper end was a much higher elevation on the bottom, where it heads across a creek with shin-deep water to enter the field. At the top of the field, the right-hand corner was where I was going to enter the woods. It was the highest point of the field. I had to pick my way through a thick blackberry thicket but managed to find a game trail that led me through, and it finally opens into a hillside with large trees. After finding a tree suitable for my climbing stand getting set up, and a little climb, I was ready to hunt. I love to watch nature. The deer hunting was just an excuse to be in the woods. As a lineman, I had no fear of climbing high, so I would get as high as I could. This time, I was up around 20 feet before the canopy started blocking my view. It was around 5:30 when I was settled in my stand and had an arrow knocked. I regularly stated my permanent stands late, as not to spook deer close by. I had added reflective tape along the trail to mark the way out. This made it easier to find my permanent stands at night, but this day I was in my climbing stand in an area I hadn't been in. That night, I was about to start down when I heard something walking. So I waited. It sounded like a deer in the thicket, but I never really could get a look at. It was 8 o'clock and close to a full moon that night, so from my high vantage point, I could see pretty good in the woods, and I felt like I could still shoot up to 15 yards, but it was after shooting hours, so I started down. As I did, I could hear the loud crashing of a deer that must have spotted me moving like a sloth down the tree. On the ground, I quickly secured my stand and bow and looked in the direction of the way I came in. I turned on my flashlight. Now, the woods look different at night in the dark and downright foreign when you turn on your flashlight. It's not bad in a mature woods with no undergrowth, but I was walking into a thicket. I walked along the edge of the thicket for a while trying to find the trail I came in on, but no luck. It was almost 9 o'clock now and I was ready to get out, so I just started picking my way through the thicket, keeping the moon on my right shoulder. And finally, I came out into the field about 25 yards from where I went in. As I stood there, picking the thorns out of my hands and legs, thinking this adventure was over, I surveyed the lane around the field, and in the light of the pale moon, I saw it now. When I walked in, I came up the left side of the field around 200 yards. To the end, turned right and walked another 100 yards. Where I was, it was higher on the ground, and I could see around the field where I came in. When I walked in, there was nothing in the trail. I hadn't heard any equipment or ATVs, so I was shocked to see something in the trail and no small. Something either looked 6 feet wide and 6 feet tall, just standing there about halfway up the field trail. It was the only way out, so I never hesitated. I started walking back to the trail, turned toward whatever it was standing there, hoping it was just a strange shadow, but it wasn't. I grabbed an arrow from the quiver, remembering my knife was in my three-wheeler. I walked fast and never broke stride, 100 yards away, and it didn't move or make a sound. I walked loudly straight towards it for 200 yards, all the while thinking it's really there, in my trail, blocking my only way out. As I got closer, I could make out what it was. It was two people standing side by side, and this unnerved me even more. It was 9:15, 40 degrees out here. Nobody should be here. I kept walking now, 20 yards away, and I see that it's a guy and girl, maybe 20 years old, 10 yards away. I'm walking towards them, but no sounds from them. They just stood there. When I got to them, I half expected them to jump me, but they never moved. I said, "Kinda cold out here, ain't it?" No sound. They still never moved. I kept walking. I turned to keep an eye on them. I was thinking, okay, this is it. They never turned around, never even moved their heads across the creek, and within another 100 yards I made it back to my truck. I was even more uneasy approaching my truck. It was just so quiet. All I could think of was someone waiting to ambush me, so I kind of eased up on it very quietly and watched it for maybe 3 minutes before approaching it. It seemed fine, so I headed to my truck as I left. I tried to figure out how they got here because I never saw another vehicle. I tried to just put it behind me, but the next day at work during lunch I was going to run and get some food, and I noticed all four of my tires on my truck were low, and after inspecting them, they all had around 10 to 15 roofing nails in them. I had to put tubes in them to get home. Something odd was going on in those woods. Somebody most certainly did this to my tires while it was parked in them. After this, it always felt like someone was watching me when I was hunting in that area. That's why I stopped going alone and I never parked off the main gravel road. Again, I never found out who those two young people were or who punctured my tires. Foreign.